Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe. I'm very excited to welcome Zacary Landolt to the podcast today to talk about an X-rated animated movie. We had to talk about this one on Film at 50. It's Fritz the Cat. How are we doing, Zacary?
What a wild journey this movie was. Thank you for having me.
Had you heard of this movie before?
No, I had never.
You'd never heard of it?
No.
So when I was in high school, I don't know how or why, I found out that there was an X-rated animated feature. It might have been just like on IMDb or something. It came up one day and I went, what? How could an animated movie be rated X? I mean, R-rated animated films are pretty rare. I have a couple we'll talk about at the end. They come up here and there, but like X-rated, like it's such a specific rating for, I mean, any movie at the time, even in the early 70s, it was hard to get an X for an animated movie to get an X. So I immediately tracked this one down. I can't remember how I watched it. I don't think it was at the video store. I'm like trying to remember. It was in high school. Like I was like, I gotta watch this.
Oh my gosh.
And it definitely made an impression. And I saw it once, so that would have been like 18, 19 years ago, something like that. Yeah. And I haven't really thought about it since until I was looking through obviously the films of 72, and then I saw Fritz the Cat and I was like, yeah, it's time to revisit and see what it's like now. I'm in my 30s. Like how does this movie hold up? So what, like, I'll talk a little bit about the research, but just to kind of start us off, like what was your kind of first impression of this one? How did this one land for you?
Boy. I also was wondering, well, what could make a animated movie rated X? Like I don't really understand what could happen, and stuff happens in this movie. I will
including in the first 10 minutes.
I mean, wow, like it was very, I don't know what I was expecting, but it was like even weirder than my wildest expectation is what I would say.
Have you seen a lot of animated films of this period, like the 70s? A lot of animated films?
Yes, but like more like bigger budget, bigger studio stuff. So I guess everything has that weird 70s sheen to it back then. But I was just looking at the animation sometimes. I'm like, this looks really cheap. And then I'm like, oh, right, this is indie. So it was wild. The narrative, I really had to like pay attention because I kept thinking like, don't look away from the screen for more than a couple of seconds, or I'm just gonna be very lost. A lot was happening.
Oh yeah, we get adventures in the deserts, right? We get a scene in a bathtub in the first 10 minutes. How long does that scene last?
Too long.
At least 5 minutes, maybe longer. And I'm just like, oh, okay.
The bathtub scene was about, let's say it was like 7 minutes, 5 minutes.
Yeah,
it could have been 3 minutes shorter, in my opinion. I was just like, I was uncomfortable. Uncomfortable.
Well, it's hard to talk about the movie being shorter when it's 78 minutes, I believe is the running time.
Too long.
You think it should have been Dumbo length? Dumbo is 64 minutes.
And Dumbo is lovely. And so if Dumbo can do it, Fritz the Cat could do it. I was just thinking when we were in the bathtub scene, I was just like, what's the full narrative of this film going to be? Like where are we headed to? There's an hour left in this movie. It was I'm gonna break down
some of the background of this movie. I think it clears up a little bit of like what the movie's all about. Before we get to that, since you haven't been on the podcast before, I'd love for you to talk about just briefly like kind of your history of film, and if you have a few favorites, like what has film meant to you throughout the years? Like what do movies mean to you?
For me, I was a little closeted gay kid in the South and lived in the middle. Okay. Mm-hmm. In the South, lived in the middle of nowhere on a farm, so there was not a lot of culture around me. So I think
hard to find dates.
kind of hard to find dates. I would say that was kind of more of a college thing. But I would say film is kind of where it was like an escape from where I was. Like I was that weird kid that was trying to tell my friends at like age 14, oh, have you ever seen Au revoir les enfants?
Oh yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? Just watching weird French foreign films to feel classier than I was.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird to say this now because it's more of a taboo topic, but I really got into the films of Woody Allen at one point, which
we just talked about him this morning. We talked about Play It Again Sam came out the same almost to the week that Fritz the Cat came out.
Wow.
So it was a difficult episode to talk about, but it feels wrong of me to be doing a podcast about the films of the 70s and to just ignore him completely. So it's gonna be kind of touch and go, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's about like separating what that moment in time meant for you and knowing a greater context now, are two very different things.
Exactly.
If someone said like, what are some of your favorite movies, I'd be lying if I didn't say that Annie Hall was one of my favorite movies, but I don't shout it out at parties.
Yeah.
But
like, just have you guys seen Annie Hall? Put it on.
Who loves Woody Allen? Who wants to talk about Woody Allen?
A fan? Yeah. Hannah and Her Sisters is another one that I love, and it's just
I could, don't get me started because I'll get in trouble. There are many I would shout out. But like, I guess some of my favorites, All About Eve is one of my favorite movies of all time, but I also love
All About Eve is great.
It's the best.
I have problems with it because my favorite film of all time is Sunset Boulevard, and All About Eve took over that year's Oscars, and so I have a little bit of a gripe with All About Eve. But other than that,
all right, and they're both great.
Both great, yeah.
But something about just bitchy Betty Davis with a cigarette, it's just like having it's a lot of fun.
Her first shot in All About Eve, where she's a little older, looks a little rough, and she's got the cigarette. It's like classic Betty Davis.
Classic Betty Davis, yeah. But I'm really, I do gravitate towards either really pretentious dramas or comedy.
Oh, okay. What do you mean by pretentious dramas? What do you mean by that?
Well, like, I don't know a lot of kids when I was in high school that were just obsessed with the movie The Hours. And I would just, I used to watch, I would watch a lot of movies that were way too dramatic for a child my age to be like watching. And I would just I was watching a lot of indie art house films, and that has definitely, I love a good cry. I love a good cry. It's very therapeutic, but I also just love silly comedies. Like, say what?
When it's earned, right? When it's like, it's not like toying with you with its music and like the actual, like the content of the film and the delivery by the actors, like when it's really earned, that's like that's when a great, that's when a great cry is worth it.
And also, sometimes it's not even a prestige art house film. Like, one movie that always makes me cry is Sleepless in Seattle, and I don't know why. Every single time I watch that movie.
I just love Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks together. Like, I just love.
Can they get back together? Like,
and that's why I kind of prefer You've Got Mail, because they're in that together more. Sleepless in Seattle, they're always apart. So.
It's like the answer to Sleepless in Seattle, because I'm like, this is a lovely movie, but they have all of like 2 minutes of screen time.
Even though it's a hard movie to reckon with You've Got Mail, because he's so awful to her in terms of like, he basically shuts down her business, but they end up together anyway.
It is hard, yeah.
But it's still great.
Like, there's the Bird Cage, there's What's Up Doc, Tootsie is.
Oh, we just did What's Up Doc. Yeah.
Oh my God,
that was February, March of 72.
It's the best. I've seen that movie so many times, and I could quote the entire film of Tootsie. Like, I think if you just put it on, I could probably just like talk along with the entire script.
Tootsie's great.
So yeah, I don't know. I love a giggle and I love a tear.
And what about animation? What's been your relationship with animation?
Oh, animation. Well, when I was a kid, it was all about Disney. It was all about the Disney. Like
what was your favorite Disney animated movie growing up? Did you have a favorite?
Ooh.
What kind of all of them were great?
Probably Beauty and the Beast.
Beauty and the Beast is my favorite. That movie is, to me,
great.
like perfection.
It's perfect. It's really great. And it was like a Broadway musical as an animated film. It was great.
Every song hits. It's just like, it's great story.
And it was nominated for Best Picture. It's very impressive.
Yeah, I don't know if was just posted to YouTube, but I had never seen it before a few weeks ago, like maybe a few months ago. But Kathleen Turner like announcing live the nominees for the 1991 films for the Oscars. And when she says the nominees for Best Picture of 1991 are Beauty and the Beast, the crowd erupts in this giant cheer that I have never heard in one of those nominations announcements, because it was unprecedented. No animated feature film had ever been nominated for Best Picture. And now you have, and that was when we had 5 nominees for Best Picture. Now it's 10. Now there's an animated feature category. So there's not really that prestige that Beauty and the Beast accomplished back in 1992 when it got nominated for Best Picture.
Right? Agreed.
It's a better film than Fritz the Cat. If you like Beauty and the Beast, check out, we did a 30th anniversary bonus episode in November of 2021. I talked to Robbie Weber, great author. He talked about kind of his love for Beauty and the Beast, and it was a great back and forth. Check that out. We just talked about that recently.
I wish I'll do that.
So Disney movies, like growing up, did you see anything outside of Disney when it came to animation, or was it just
sure, like there's also like the like Don Bluth films.
Don Bluth, yep.
Yeah, like All Dogs Go to Heaven,
An American Tail.
Oh, American Tail, yeah. All of like Thumbelina. There's a big Thumbelina moment in my household.
He worked for Disney, if I'm not mistaken, like Don Bluth, and then he split away and created his own studio for animation. And I remember that as a kid, even as a young kid, I'd recognize like, oh, that's not Disney, that's something else. Land Before Time.
Which I think I was like, this is cool because it's like, it's as good as Disney, but it's not Disney, you know.
Land Before Time, speaking of a movie that makes you cry.
Oh boy, oh my gosh.
That
was intense.
These movies, I mean, Disney does it too, obviously, in like Bambi and the Lion King, where the mother or the father gets killed like during the narrative after you've spent time with them. It's like a kid's first reckoning with death. It's like, oh,
yes.
God, I mean that moment in Bambi where he's like expecting her to join him, and then she doesn't, and then he walks out and it's snowing and there's no music, there's almost no sound. All you hear is him go, "Mother, mother." I mean, that's just like, that's devastating.
I can't stop it. Moving forward.
There's not that kind of emotion in Fritz the Cat. All right.
Not that emotion.
This was, I mean, I'm trying to think like if before Fritz the Cat in high school, if I had seen any other movie that was rated PG-13 or up that had animation in it. I'm sure there must have been a couple examples, like Cool World. Remember that movie?
Thank you. That's the first one I thought of when you were talking about like, oh, think of some like adult. That was the first movie I ever saw because my parents, God love them, they used to we rented movies all the time. Because then lived in the middle of nowhere, and sometimes they would just rent movies. I don't think they even read the box. They're like, oh, that looks good, I'll rent that.
Oh,
I think they just saw. Yeah, and I was obsessed with Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yes, and that movie's scary at the end for kids. Like when like when Christopher Lloyd reveals himself as the nemesis and he's got those big eyes. Like that scared me to death when I saw that at 5 or 6 or whatever it was.
I was way too young. Yeah, I'm 34. How old are you?
Yeah, I'm 37.
All right. Yeah.
So remember, like his voice changes, and he's like, "Remember when I killed your brother?" And it's just like, and his eyes are like swirling. I mean, that was terrifying.
Christopher Lloyd, he knows what he's doing. But I remember my mom must have seen the box to Cool World and thought, oh, that kind of looks like Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah.
And so she was like, here, I rented you a movie. And I'm like watching it on my little TV in my room. And I was just like, I don't think I should be watching this. And it's so funny because when I was a child, I thought it was the most adult movie in the world. And I watched it like several years ago. And I was like, oh, okay, like this isn't as crazy.
I haven't seen Cool World since I was a kid. Does it hold up at all? Like,
it's not a very good movie.
Yeah,
like,
Brad Pitt, right?
Yeah, Brad Pitt. I mean, I was like, oh, Brad Pitt's in this? Like, I had no memory of that. But it was definitely too adult for a child to be seeing.
I think that's sure. PG-13, if I'm not mistaken. PG-13.
Yeah. But yeah, that was wild. That was the first time I as a child went, oh, animation can be not for kids. Like this is definitely not for a child.
Yeah, and then of course there are some R-rated animated films that I'll talk about a couple of them at the end. But then there's Fritz the Cat, which I don't know if there's another animated feature that got an X or an NC-17 rating. I don't think. I mean, there's South Park. Was that was just rated R in 99?
Yeah, just R.
Yeah. But I mean, looking back, did this movie deserve an X rating, Fritz the Cat?
You think? I mean,
or would an R? Was an R enough?
Well, I guess for the time period.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think about someone whose job it is to rate a film
in 72
saw this movie. Good grief! Like, I mean, I kind of don't blame them for giving it an X rating, because I don't know.
I could see the thinking of like, we cannot allow any kids to watch this.
I think that was probably it. They're like, let's make it abundantly clear that this is not for children, because I mean, it's 2022 and I watched this as myself and I was honestly in shock during several parts of this movie. And I'm no prude or anything, but there were some scenes where I felt uncomfortable.
Which leads me to my question, which I thought about throughout this. Like, who was this movie made for?
That's a great. I mean,
like, who could possibly think that this would be? But it wasn't a box office bomb.
No, that was
like it made money. It has a sequel.
I don't know if I want to see it, but like I did.
That's what amazes me, is that it brought enough people in. Is it just like a very specific group of people that just saw it over and over and over?
I feel like it was probably, like, not to stereotype, but I feel like it was probably a lot of maybe people that partake in pot. There's a lot of pot smoking stoners in this film. A lot of stoners. Like, I think if
Friday night at midnight.
Really, like a midnight. It seems like it has midnight film vibes. I feel like people got really stoned and maybe watched this
and just laughed their asses off. Watched it, just like all the shenanigans of these 78 minutes.
Yeah, like I definitely think maybe I was too sober for this. Like I watched it in the dead of the afternoon.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange movie to watch when you're in your 30s by yourself, just in the middle of the afternoon, and just like, okay, this is for a podcast to talk about its history.
Again, I don't know what I thought I was gonna watch. I
you had no expectations. You didn't know what's coming.
I
told you it was rated X, right?
You did. No, you totally did. So I was like, oh, it must be just lots of language, which I mean, there was, but it was a whole different thing.
I think language-wise, I mean, obviously some of the words in it are very dated. You don't hear today in films, but I feel like it was the sexual content that made it rated X.
I mean, my God, yes.
The bathtub scene.
Oh, I'm so uncomfortable.
Fritz has more than one lady.
Yes.
And there's like no purpose. It's just like it just goes on and on and on, and then we're like 8 minutes into the movie, and it's just like, okay, there's no story. Like
that's the thing.
My main note with this movie was like, do it like a hard R rating, like, but tell a good story, like make us care about Fritz, give him an adventure. Give us motivation. And aside from like, there's a sequence in the desert that I found kind of interesting. There were stretches of this movie where you don't care. It's just like episodic, and every few scenes they're shocking you with something. And that's kind of it. I didn't find this movie funny at all. Like I did not laugh at any jokes. No. Did you?
No, there's no giggles. I didn't. There's
not like the humor of the movie is like, eh.
I laughed nervously, just like, oh my God. But I mean, I very much agree with you. It felt like just a bunch of sequences sewn together, which I guess technically it is film. Yeah, but
let me get into kind of the origins of the piece. And I mean, it kind of makes sense when you find out like how it got started and why it is as episodic as it is. So for those of you who've never seen this, which I'm sure is most of you, so Fritz the Cat, Fritz is a glib, womanizing, fraudulent cat in an animal version. of New York City during the mid to late 60s. The movie does not take place in the 70s. It's like the 60s. So this got its start with R. Crumb, who was still a teenager when he made the character Fritz the Cat for his self-published comics he made with his older brother, Charles. Crumb moved to San Francisco in 67, where he took part in the counterculture and indulged in drugs such as LSD. I don't think that'll be a shock to anybody. No. When you've watched Fritz the Cat, he had countercultural strips published in underground periodicals. In 1968, published the first issue of Zap Comics. His cartoons became progressively more sexually explicit and violent, and Crumb became the center of the burgeoning underground comics movement of that time. Fritz the Cat became Crumb's best-known creation, particularly outside of that counterculture. So it's starting at the comics level, with Crumb. And then it all comes down to writer-director Ralph Bakshi. He's browsing the East Side bookstore. He comes across a copy of R. Crumb's Fritz the Cat, published in 1969. He was impressed by the satire. He purchased the book. He suggested to a producer friend of his, Steve Krantz, that this could work as a movie. He was interested in directing the film because he felt Crumb's work was the closest to his own, the kind of work that he was producing at the time. With the rights to the character, Krantz and Bakshi set out to find a distributor. He states that every major distributor turned it down. Shocking.
Yeah, shocker.
I want to know if he had a meeting with Disney. I feel like that would be a movie.
I'd watch that movie.
like a movie of I would watch a film made today about a guy in the early 70s trying to make an R-rated, X-rated animated feature and just trying to get it off the ground and meeting with executives at Disney. That would be hilarious. Imagine if that was played by a Seth Rogen or a really great comedic actor, and he was the star, and he was trying to get this animated movie off the ground that's made for adults.
Oh, sure.
And he's going around town and trying to get it funded. I feel like that could be an interesting film.
I mean, honestly, the making of this film, I think I might enjoy more than the actual film itself, because especially knowing how successful it ends up being financially, it's kind of wild. You know, it's definitely an interesting tale of how it got made. It's fascinating that this was able to get made at all.
I think a 78-minute film about the making of Fritz the Cat, taking us from its origins to its success and its sequel that came out a couple years later, would be a more interesting film to watch than the movies. You're absolutely
That's the
right.
thing. I wish the movie was more fun. It was just kind of
it's violent. It's got scenes
violent.
of really just unpleasant violence of people of
really...
these characters dying. There's a part where a bunch of chickens are killed that I found just very distasteful. It just was and it's not funny. It's just okay, that's awful.
Distasteful is a good word for several sequences in this. Yeah, very distasteful.
So studios were unenthusiastic about producing an independent animated film due to the prominence of Disney. But in the spring of 1970, Warner Brothers agreed to fund and distribute the movie. So at a point in time in early 70, Warner Brothers said, we'll do this. I'm assuming they would have understood that it was going to be an R-rated film.
I wonder if the script was different. I wonder
maybe it was PG.
They didn't fully understand, or it's PG-13.
Maybe they were well, we want to get into the animation business. This guy really wants to make an animated movie. It's about a cat. Okay, we'll go for it.
I have a feeling they were pitched a very particular framing of what this film was going to be, and then read an actual script and went, no.
But this is the best part. This is the best part of the story. So Warner Brothers approves its production in spring of 70. In November of 1970, Bakshi and Krantz screened a presentation reel for Warner Brothers. Bakshi stated, "You should have seen their faces in the screening room when I first screened a bit of Fritz. I will remember their faces until the day I die. One of them left the room. Holy hell, you should have seen his face. Shut up, Frank," he said. "This is not the movie you were allowed to make." And I said, "Bullshit, I just made it."
Again, I would watch that. Like what you just said, I'm like, I'm riveted. Like I want to be in that room.
Like first pitching it to studios and them just going no, and then the scene of Warner Brothers executives watching not the whole thing, but just a reel of some of the film, and just the slow realization of what they had approved a few months before.
Let's imagine it was the bathtub sequence, and they went, "What's happened? What's going on here?"
As a studio, you're funding this animated movie, and then you see the bathtub scene. Oh. Nobody in their right mind would be like, "Okay, yeah, okay, keep going, keep doing what you're doing."
Yeah,
you'd be horrified, right?
Maybe because it's animated, they were just off in their little animation studio for the longest times. They were like, "Yeah, how's the film going? Cool."
I think you're right. I think this was probably a case of like there was some sort of, they probably had storyboards and they had a vague kind of concept for the movie, and Warner Brothers said, "Okay, go off and do it." And then months later, they wanted to see some of it, and then they screened it, and they went, "Oh my god!" I think that's probably what happened. So there was still a back and forth. Warner Brothers, they wanted the sexual content tone way down, and they also wanted to cast a big name for the voice of Fritz. Bakshi refused both, and so Warner pulled their funding from the film, leading Krantz to seek funds elsewhere to complete it. This led to a deal with a man named Jerry Gross, the owner of a company called Cinemation Industries, which was a distributor at the time specializing in exploitation films. Although Bakshi did not have enough time to pitch the movie, Gross agreed to fund the remainder of its production and distribute it, believing it would be a great fit with his Grindhouse slate. So that kind of, I mean, that's a big leap from Warner Brothers to exploitation film.
Yeah, it's a big hole.
I feel like other filmmakers, they might have, when Warner Brothers bailed, the movie might have just shut down, and that would have been it. And we just would never have had the film.
It's funny because I mean, I guess good for him for I guess sticking up for the movie he wanted to make, I suppose. But like, if Warner Brothers told me like, if they're like, we'll make the movie, but like you just need to tone down this sexual content. Like this needs, I just would have been like, okay, fair enough.
I mean, the scene with the female crow, right? Which is another scene of sex that goes on for a while, and it's just like there is no reason for it other than to shock the viewer. It's not like I would understand if every sexual scene in the movie played an important role in the story. It pushed the narrative forward. It was building up Fritz as a character or something. But there was not one moment of sexuality in this that felt like it needed to be there. It felt like it was just there because they said, let's do something no one's ever done before. Let's just shock everybody with our animation.
And it did. And it did shock me.
That's the problem with the movie.
It felt...
Among others.
among others. Yeah, it just felt... Yeah, like... dirty. It was like, I don't know.
It's I felt the weird. Specific period, like the animation, even in Disney of the early 70s, is not great. Like no, like the Aristocats and Robin Hood and Rescuers. There is, even in like the highest quality Disney animated features, there is something to the animation that makes it look a little dated. It looks a little bit cheaper, dusty. And so when you get an independent animated movie of this era, it's not going to look great. I mean, one of my notes was the animation in some ways looks so bad. I actually kind of liked that about it. Like, I actually kind of like, because you don't ever see animated movies look this dirty and this grungy. Like, so that was kind of interesting to me.
It was interesting. It's interesting. One of my biggest notes was just, this looks cheap. Like,
this looks cheap.
This looks very cheap. And like you said, like
it looks better than some of the modern day like television series where it's all like the computer stuff, where it's clearly like they're just like typing in some numbers and then enter, and then that's a 6-minute scene of the show.
Yeah.
Like, have you seen some of the stuff they make for kids today in 2022, like on Disney Channel and stuff? Like some of that, like really like where they, like it's like Mickey Mouse and he kind of moves like this and it's like all computerized and it looks just really like they threw it together in a day. Like I prefer the Fritz animation to that. I don't but
I'd have to look at the other thing.
like Mickey's Playhouse, I think it's called. Like my nephew was
boy.
watching it at their house a few months, and I watched it with him for like 10 minutes. I'm like, oh, I can't even look at this.
Oh my.
This is like mind numbing.
I do miss the like hand-drawn animation
Hand-drawn animation.
Because I feel
best.
like the last Disney one I can really think of, I don't know if there's been one since this, was like Princess and the Frog.
So their last, so before like this, like the computer animation revolution really began around like 05, like they were still hand drawing stuff. And there was like a 5-year period where like every movie Disney and every animated movie Disney made was losing money, like Treasure Planet and Brother Bear and Home on the Range. So they turned to computer animation.
Bad movies.
And then, well, at this time, Pixar has a film every year and a half, and each one is just like an amazing film. It's breaking records at the box office. So I could see the higher ups at Disney Animation. They're like, okay, we need to go computer animation. And so, but then I remember John Lasseter said, we're going to do a mix. We're not going to just do all computer animation. So then they went back to hand drawn for Princess and the Frog, which came out in 09. And that movie kind of underperformed. And then that was it. They've never done, Disney has never done hand drawn since.
And it's a bummer because, not to go on a tangent, but like Princess and the Frog is like so, I don't think it's a perfect film, but it's gorgeous to look at. You look at the beautiful animation and you're just like, oh, why don't they do this more? Yeah. Just because it's the last real like hand-drawn Disney musical that like there really was. So I missed that. And this was also hand-drawn.
Yeah. And hand-drawn by many people. I was curious, like, how did these guys get animators for this movie? So I read, it said many of the animators who worked on Fritz the Cat were professionals that Bakshi had previously worked with at a company called Terry Toons. According to Bakshi, it took quite a long time to assemble the right staff. Those who entered with a smirk, wanting to animate everything very dirty and filthy, those people did not last long. And neither did those with a very low tolerance for vulgarity. So I think those animators who came in, they're like, ooh, we're gonna draw like, you know, body parts, and we're gonna just I think they didn't last long. Like, you needed someone with the stamina to still like complete the story and like and do what the creators wanted them to do. I don't know. I also feel like it could have just been a group of like young guys like, look what we get to do.
That's kind of what I assumed it probably was. It's a bunch of
because of the bathtub scene.
And I mean, and there's the horse girlfriend like towards that scene. I actually was just uncomfortable, and I was upset.
The biggest laugh for me in the whole movie is we get, so first it's Fritz and like 3 other cats in the tub, and then eventually there's like 10 or more in the tub, and the camera kind of pans out, and there's a cat. I think it was a cat, it might have been a different animal on the left hand side, just quietly reading a book. That was my one big laugh of the whole movie. I thought that was good. That was nice detail.
There were, like a lot of
there's just all the sex going on around just reading a book.
Oh yeah, you know, he's trying to read. It's probably a dirty magazine.
That's right, probably.
It probably is. Yeah, there were lots of like, I think there were attempts at jokes in the movie, but they were so heavy-handed that it wasn't even like, I'm like, oh, the cops are pigs. Like, you know,
that felt very dated. I'm like, okay, the cops are pigs, and it's like, okay, I don't know. That felt kind of obvious.
Yeah,
Attempts at humor. But then you have black characters in the film, and it seems to be like kind of commenting on race relations and of the time. And that part I think is kind of clunky. It just seems like way too, it's like beating you over the head for an animated movie. I mean, I was like, well, I guess it's kind of interesting that, I mean, how many animated films comment on that? It's pretty rare. So I guess that's interesting, but the way that they handle that, I thought that also was really dated. Like, it didn't really work. Okay. Maybe it worked better back in 72.
Maybe. I mean, maybe because now it's just like, oh boy, to see this in 2022.
Yeah, with that violent scene with the cops, that just felt very strange today to watch that.
Just really strange, and and really, again, like bludgeoning you over the head with what it's trying to say. I was like, no, I get it.
Overly bloody. Any gunshot, it's just like blood all over the screen.
Yeah, I know they wanted to talk about important themes, but they didn't do it in a very, I guess, nuance is not the word I would ever use.
There's not nuance in Fritz.
But I just don't know why he didn't want to make a better narrative structure to this. You know what I mean?
Why take the time? Yeah.
I wish it was just an R-rated, I wish it was an R-rated drama with a cat, but it happened to be an animated film. You know what I mean? Some way to make an actual plot, which I guess there is a plot.
Not much.
I mean, things happen.
What does Fritz want? Sex. Is there anything else he wants?
That's what I was.
Was there a specific plot where he's going after something outside of just wanting to have sex?
I mean, I guess he wants to maybe be a successful writer.
Okay.
He does. I'm really
kind of hanging by a thread there. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really grasping at straws. He does burn down his apartment buildings.
He kind of blows himself up at the end. And I thought, does this end with Fritz dying?
But then we end up with him in the hospital with the same three.
With the same three, cats, and the sexcapade begins again.
And then I tell you, when the ending got there, I just went, oh boy. I was just like, okay, here we go.
There's a moment where he blows himself up and it fades to black, and then it just fades in on a shot of New York. And I went, oh, is that it? That's the movie? Oh, that's a weird end. Oh, okay. No, there's 5 more minutes. Okay.
I think I also had a moment of all right, that's something. That's something. And then
all right, so Fritz received an X rating from the Motion Picture Association of America, which of course is equivalent to today's NC-17 rating, which is almost never used. Once in a blue moon, like a influential director will get away, we'll just do an NC-17 movie. Right. I'm trying to think, have we had an NC-17 film in the last 5 years? A movie that people were that people were talking about. A lot of foreign filmmakers often will get slapped with an NC-17 here and there.
Yeah,
but,
I guess I was thinking
it's been a while.
Did Lars von Trier get an NC-17?
Yeah, I feel like that filmmaker has probably gotten in. Was it that? What was that one with the
serial killer
Antichrist? The one with Willem Dafoe. Didn't that get
and Charlotte
an NC-17?
Or not Charlotte Rampling. Who was that movie?
Yeah, wasn't it Rampling? No, not Rampling. No. I know you're talking about. Yeah, Charlotte. Yeah, her name's Charlotte.
Charlotte
Gainsbourg.
There we go. Thank you.
Charlotte Rampling would have also worked great.
That's a very different movie.
That would have Antichrist. I think that's NC-17. Maybe it's R. I'm not sure.
He also had some movie he made about a serial killer that I feel was maybe NC-17.
The one with Matt Dillon.
Yeah,
the house that Jack built or something like that.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah,
I think that's NC. I think did that get NC-17? I mean, I remember reading that people were walking out. It was so shocking and it's violent.
Yeah, I find his films very interesting to at least observe. To just interesting, but even that one, I'm I don't know if I can watch this. I really don't. I don't know.
Because most of the time, if there's been enough money put into the film, filmmakers are forced to deliver an R rating.
Sure.
And they will go back and forth until they finally get that R rating, and then they move on. No. A lot of horror filmmakers had to put up with that. Wes Craven, Scream was rated NC-17 more than once until they finally got an R. And then
it's so funny you mentioned Scream, because that movie, there are so many sequences. I watched this thing recently where they said, the original version before they edited the movie looked like this, and I was like, that's what I saw. So I don't know.
That's on YouTube. Someone put on YouTube comparison, and it's 22 seconds. They cut few frames off of this shot, a few frames off of that, and that's it. That's all they did.
But they showed the opening. They showed this one version of the boyfriend. And I'm like, that's what I saw. When I was younger, I didn't see this other thing.
Yeah, because it's I think we remember in our minds so shocked by his death, Steve, the boyfriend. I think we think we saw it, but we didn't.
I think I'm telling you,
your print had it.
I swear I saw it because I was like, no, because I remember the entrails going down his lap, and me being like, that's a visceral image. Yeah, visceral.
But yeah, so I mean, it's, outside of like horror films and some of these things, I mean, if you have a lot of nudity and sex in your movie today as a film, I think it's still pretty easy to get an NC-17 if you're really going in that direction.
As long as you don't do anything too specifically graphic, I feel like they don't go NC-17.
So yeah, back in the early 70s, it wasn't an NC-17 rating, it was an X rating. And one of the most famous X-rated movies of all time is Midnight Cowboy. That came out in 1969 and won Best Picture at the Academy Awards. The only X-rated movie to win Best Picture. Did you know that?
I did. I'm a big Oscars nerd.
Have you seen Midnight Cowboy?
A long time ago, like in high school. I haven't watched it since. I probably should see it again.
I watched it for its 50th anniversary, and it's pretty tame for an X-rated movie. I think today it'd get a clean R rating. There's like a couple moments in it, some language and some sex and sexual situations, but it's pretty tame for X like that. I think Fritz the Cat is much more X-rated than Midnight Cowboy.
Yeah, it's been so long since I've seen it that I can't even remember like why it would have been X like when I was watching it. Like, but I definitely don't remember watching it and being like traumatized. Not that I was traumatized by Fritz, but I was just shocked. But yeah, that one did not seem as honestly. This seemed crazier. Oh
yeah, for sure. So Fritz gets an X rating. It became the first American animated film to get that rating. Krantz stated that the film lost playdates due to the X rating. Shocker. And 30 American newspapers rejected advertising the movie. They did not advertise the film in their newspapers. The film's limited screenings led Cinemation to exploit the film's content in its promotion, which led many to believe that Fritz the Cat was a pornographic movie. In May of 1972, Krantz tried to appeal the X rating, saying animals having sex is not pornography. The MPAA refused to hear the appeal. The misconceptions about the film's content were eventually cleared up when it received praise from Rolling Stone magazine and the New York Times, and the film got accepted into the 1972 Cannes Film Festival. Bakshi later stated, "Now they do as much on The Simpsons as I got an X rating for Fritz the Cat." I think that's hyperbole. I don't think there's anything on The Simpsons that comes close to what's in Fritz the Cat, but okay.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't agree with that.
Can you believe that Fritz the Cat was accepted into Cannes? That's interesting.
Wow, that's wild.
Out of competition.
Oh, can you imagine this? Like people just watching this at Cannes. Like, that's just
getting all dressed up in their tuxes and their dresses, like fancy night out at the movies at Cannes, and they watch Fritz the Cat.
Oh boy! Again, like him saying, "You should have seen their faces." When I show them the footage, I'm like, back then, like this is completely unprecedented as a thing. So I can only imagine what the response was when, first of all, like, why are you watching this animated movie? This is interesting. And then, you get this borderline, snuff film. It's like, well, I guess not snuff
I feel like
film,
the European audience might have appreciated it more. I feel like they would have been like, this is great. This is fantastic.
This is brilliant. This is brilliant.
So critical reaction at the time was mixed, but generally positive. It's not like every critic hated on this movie in 1972. Vincent Canby in the New York Times said the film is constantly funny. There's something to offend just about everyone. Crumb, the creator of Fritz the Cat, the character, he later said in an interview, he felt the film was really a reflection of Ralph Bakshi's confusion. There's something real repressed about it. In a way, it's more twisted than my stuff. It's really twisted in some kind of weird, unfunny way.
Unfunny.
So he did not like the movie as much as Vincent Canby.
Yeah.
Like, imagine being the head film critic of the New York Times in 1972, when film is just, there's just so much interesting, so many interesting films coming out at this period. To be the head of the New York Times, like film criticism unit, and you give this a pass. You give Fritz the Cat, like, yeah, it's funny. It's offensive and it's funny. Check it out. Like, I'm kind of surprised about that.
I'm shocked. I mean, I guess maybe they just thought like, oh, you should it's wild. You should
it's something
see this.
new.
You should.
It's something nobody. It's something nobody had ever seen before. So it had that going for it.
Right? Yes, and it was, and again, like I think how this movie made so much money was just, I think, the shock value of like, you've got to see this wild movie.
Yeah.
This isn't the
teenagers
same...
at the time. I bet they were telling, oh my god, like if I had been. I mean, well, I kind of had that with the South Park movie when I was a teenager, but like to have like an X-rated animated movie when you're younger, like I feel like most of those, especially boys, would seek it out.
I mean, the South Park movie is probably my best example. I remember sneaking in to see the South Park movie because I was just so desperate to see this R-rated, animated movie. And I do remember thinking that movie was the most shocking thing ever.
Yeah.
When I was, I came out like what, 2000?
Came out in the summer of 99, I think June of
99. Oh, so I was, so I was like
I was
12.
a little young for it. I was 14 when it came out. So I was just maybe 2 years late. If it had been 2 years later, I would have like snuck in and watched it. I was just a little young. So I think I rented it in 2000.
I mean, I was 12. I shouldn't have been watching it, but I definitely wanted to.
So yeah, the movie did okay critically, and it was successful enough that it spawned a sequel in 1974. I'm not going to do an episode in 2 years on the sequel.
Yeah,
not happening.
Have you
but
seen
I will
it?
mention it now. No. I mean, I maybe I'll watch a piece of it. I don't know. We'll see. I haven't heard anything like, oh, the sequel's great. Like, I haven't heard anything.
The sequel fixes things.
Yeah. So the sequel in 74 is called The 9 Lives of Fritz the Cat. It was rated R, the first time an American animated film had received that rating.
Lovely.
So Fritz gets an X, first time an American animated film ever gets that. And then 2 years later, the sequel gets an R, and that's the first R-rated American animated feature.
They were just trailblazer.
So maybe if they had made a third, it would have been PG-13, like the first PG-13 animated film.
By the time you get to the fourth one, they're G. They're like, we're like, okay, we're doing.
Yeah, and then we should get this year a 50th anniversary sequel, Fritz the Cat, rated G.
See, I don't think this will happen, but I was like, I wonder if there's some nerd somewhere that loves Fritz the Cat and wants to do some like revamped version of it that's actually more palatable.
Like I could see that happening. I feel like the name Fritz the Cat is well known enough that I feel like probably would go straight to streaming, wouldn't go to Disney Plus.
No.
But I could see like a Hulu or a Netflix premiere, Fritz the Cat 2022, and it's R-rated, not NC-17, it's R-rated, and it's just wild and crazy and has sex and violence, and it's like 70 minutes and just like kind of like a like a 50th anniversary sequel. I could see somebody doing that. I don't know. I mean, how many animated films? I mean, there was like Mitchell's versus the Machines on Netflix. That was not a Disney movie. Like, there are animated films outside of Disney that show up on streaming. I think that movie was meant for theaters. I think that was a Sony film that because of the pandemic, they just dropped it on Netflix. I think that was the case with that one. But that was great. Did you see that? That was a great movie. I love that movie.
I haven't. I keep hearing
it's so much fun.
I keep hearing it's great. I mean,
much better than this.
Listen, if you want to make a list of what's better,
if it was if this was film at 1, I would have had you on for the Mitchells versus the Machine. Film at 1. It would not be that interesting, I think, of a podcast.
Yeah.
But let's see. So that's all my trivia and research. So anything else about the film itself? Any other scenes that we haven't touched on? I've got a few notes here to look through.
There were like things I was wondering if they were meant to be a stupid joke. Like at one point they're in a synagogue and the cops are in there, and I was like, this must be a joke about pork.
Yeah, aren't there a few jokes about pork in the movie? Isn't there? I feel like there was a joke like specifically about food and like pork aimed at the cops.
Yeah, I think
sometimes what you're trying to do here, but
yeah, I disassociated a couple times during the movie, so I feel like I missed a couple of jokes.
I had some questions. So why do the male animals wear shirts but no pants?
Yeah, it's weird. Maybe just to be lewd, just be crass.
Like that
Well, at
just
one
felt
point the
strange.
cops have pants, but then they lose their pants.
Yeah.
Because stuff happens after the bathtub scene. And they lose their pants.
Yeah.
But then they never have them back ever again. And again, they have animated, anatomy that is just it just was a lot.
Yeah. The animators were very obsessed with breasts, like big breasts throughout the movie, just almost every scene. It's like, okay, we got it.
That was in my notes as well. There's a lot of feline breast animation.
It felt like this was animated by men.
By like
Maybe
like a pervy boy drawing like lewd animation in his notebook, but it's a movie.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I was just like, I don't know. It's just it feels like it's made for like 13, 14-year-old boys, but it's rated X. So it's like, well, who is this made for?
Yeah, because I mean, I could see me watching this when I was 13 and just laughing my like face off because it's so shocking.
Yeah.
But as a fully fledged adult with the art house, pretentious cinema as my preferred genre, this was not my personal cup of tea.
Yeah. Now, one other thing, was this just me? Did you notice this? There's a shot in the movie where there's like 3 characters in shadow in silhouette, and it looks like it's Mickey, Minnie, and Donald Duck. Did you see that? Did you notice that?
No, I didn't.
It's like it's towards the end. It's right after the scene of the cops being killed, the crow bleeding out. We get that imagery with the pool balls dropping into blood. That was kind of cool. I like that part.
That was interesting.
And it's like right after that. Where did I write it here? I wrote, whoa, holy crap. Was that Mickey, Minnie, and Donald Duck briefly seen in one shot in darkness?
Like it's just their silhouette?
It's like their silhouette. Like you can't really see much beyond like the eyes and just the outline. And it's maybe 3 or 4 seconds. It's just like it cuts to, and I think one has a gun or something. It's just very quick. And it looks like the silhouette, it looks like Mickey's ears and it looks like Donald's profile. It's very quick. So I hope I didn't make that up. I should have rewound it and watched it one more time, but I was like pretty sure. Like
I mean, that sounds like something they might have done.
I didn't see. I read through like the IMDb trivia. I did not see. I don't think I saw a mention of it. I feel like it would have been in there. So I'm like, maybe I'm just like, maybe I'm hallucinating.
I don't know. I feel like that seems like a darkly comedic thing they might have done.
I feel like when we're done recording, I'll like look at it again. Maybe not. Maybe I don't want to pull this movie up again.
I know. I was like, I don't really want to.
Maybe I'll just imagine for the rest of my life that did happen. If it didn't, then that's okay.
But now I am like morbidly curious. I might go.
But I'll just I should have just looked up real quick, like just Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Fritz the Cat.
Take a screenshot if you see it. Send it to me.
I'm sure if that's the case, like it's been written about. I'm sure there's pictures online. Because it wasn't like in like Little Mermaid. I think like if you freeze frame like a quick shot of like panning over all the guests, like you see for one frame or something in the top left corner, like you see Mickey and Minnie or something,
or the rescuers.
It's not like that. It was like there were 3 characters, like not in close up, but in the shot, like fairly close to the camera, like. It wasn't like they were in the background.
This movie would do. It sounds plausible.
And they were like, you couldn't really see them. You could just see their outline for a brief moment. I went, that's Mickey.
Like as a comment on, we're making you look at your Disney culture in this dark moment.
Disney's darker than you think.
I think they really thought they were doing something a lot more intelligent than they were, is what I would say. There were many moments where I'm like, I know you guys think you're clever.
Many people like this movie. I mean, I feel like I could have had a guest on who just loved on the movie for the whole time, and I'd be over here being like, what?
That's right.
There might be some listeners be like, what are the two? This movie's amazing. What are you guys talking about?
They can drag me all they want, but all I can say is it was not for me. I'm not saying
I approach everything I watch with this podcast. I try to just keep an open mind, and I'm some films I've seen before, so that's a whole other thing. It's like, does it hold up? But I put this on. I'm like, okay, let's see. It's been 20 years, however long it's been. Like, let's give it another go. Is it funny? Is it entertaining? And it's not. It's just like it just drags along, and the sex just feels shocking. And I'm like,
I probably went into it the best way you can go into it, which is with zero expectation and zero knowledge. Yeah. So I really did just watch it flatly, like how I'm sure the people did in 1972, and we're just shocked.
One of my favorite things is when you go into a movie that didn't do so well critically, and you watch it months later, and you go in with no expectations. You're like, well, this could be okay, and then it's really good. Maybe not like 4 out of 4 stars or anything, but it's like whenever a movie's better than you think it's going to be, I'm always really happy. I've
had that happen before. I've had films that were like panned by critics, and then I watch it and I'm like, do I have bad taste? I love this. Like the one that comes to mind is, do you remember that movie Cloud Atlas?
Oh yeah. No, that was
people like ripped that movie apart, but I was like really into it.
Science really fiction movies sometimes can kind of get. Horror films are the big one for me. The horror films where the critics just destroy it, and then I watch it and I'm like, this movie's amazing.
You're a bunch of snobs. Yeah.
Oh, God forbid there's a supernatural element to this movie. We must destroy it as critics. It's like, well, let's look at it a little bit closer now.
Yeah,
But I wanted to come on here and say there's a lot to actually really like in this. But it is like, this is the last time I will ever be watching this. I will not be looking at this again.
I will not say anything.
I might give the sequel a try, not as an episode. I don't think I'll do an episode on it, but I might like look at it just like as a curiosity factor. And if they were to ever do another Fritz the Cat, like I might take a look. But this film, it's the second time I looked at it. I'm good. That's it.
I felt dirty after watching it. I was like, I don't think I should.
Some stuff towards the end, as I said, there's this section in the desert I thought was kind of interesting, and there's that haunted castle part towards the end. Gave me kind of like Frankenstein vibes. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cute and fun.
Yeah, there's a part towards the end.
It's not all bad.
Where is this going? Like, I was like really getting
like, it needed to all be a road trip movie for that to really work. But by the time we get to the desert, it's like 55 minutes in, and it's like we're kind of getting towards the end, and it's like, okay, now we're starting kind of a road trip narrative.
When we met the Nazi bunny, and like there was a weird quasi satanic vibe going on, like I was like, where are we headed? Like I was uncomfortable.
But like the end just kind of ruined anything that I liked in the last third, when it's just like he's clearly injured and he's just like, he can't even move. And then a second later he's having like a foursome, and then it's kind of like the animators are winking at you like, look at this wily guy, like look at what he did.
Exactly.
And roll credits, and I'm like, no, come on. That'd be a silly joke in a 5-minute sketch.
Yeah, that was the thing. Like the ending, I wasn't probably gonna walk away with like much positive praise to have for it, but I guess I would agree at the last section of it, I was like, ooh, interesting. Or
some of the animation I liked towards the end, like it got a little bit more varied and it wasn't as ugly. I felt like at the end, like with the setting animation and stuff, it got a little better, I thought.
But then once he was like jumping up and down on the bed in the hospital and it turned into what it turned into, I went, you guys don't even care. If you don't care, I don't care. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was just like, okay, all right.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. So I mean, this is definitely one of the worst films I would say I've watched for the podcast. What it has going for it is that it's only 78 minutes. I've looked at like a film, a better film in many ways, Ryan's Daughter, but it's 3.5 hours long, and and you felt it every minute of that movie.
I'll tell you about this movie. When I was watching it, I was nervous that my roommates were gonna walk into the room at any point and they were just gonna go, what are you watching?
Yeah, so I put it on my big TV downstairs, and my partner comes home from work sometimes early, sometimes late, and I'm watching this movie, and it's the hospital scene at the end. Literally 2 minutes left, maybe a minute left,
right.
And the door opens and he walks in. And he goes, what are you watching? I said, don't even get me started.
To me, it was just the bathtub.
He goes, was this for the podcast? Is this for the podcast? I said,
yes.
Yeah.
She's like, I'd like to make it known. Yes, it's for
I am not just watching this for my own entertainment.
I felt like a pervert. I felt like a pervert watching this like many times.
Well, at least it was animals. At least it wasn't like actual humans. Then it'd just be like really weird.
But like when the horse girlfriend gets beaten up, I was like, this is very upsetting.
Yeah. So I guess like for animation historians, this is an important film. Like if you're,
I mean, I think it's worth examining.
I think as an exam, not so much as like an entertaining movie, but just like as a piece of animation history, I think it's important, and we should kind of look at its origins and its history there. But as a movie itself, I don't think it holds up, and it's not. It's a hard watch, I thought, for almost 80 minutes. It's like it feels longer than that.
Oh, it felt much longer. I do think it's worth for like film history. Just like at one point there was an X-rated.
Yeah, I think it's worth a discussion.
Sure.
Yeah, and a great documentary. I don't know. Has there been? As I was searching for a frame from the trailer to put on there was on YouTube. It said I think it was a 20-minute like video essay about the film, and it was like animated movie gets X rating, and it's like a history of the film, I think, and it has 1.2 million views, and it looks like it was a video essay about the movie. And I'm like, oh man, I should have watched this before I came on, but I might watch it later. It looked kind of interesting.
And again, if anyone's listening that can make movies, make a movie about the making. I do think the making of this movie,
I think there's a feature film like a live action feature about the making of this.
Him talking about like you should have seen the faces. Like I'm riveted. I want to see.
Like, did you see The Disaster Artist? You see that movie?
Yes, I loved it.
Like, and the making of one of the worst movies ever, The Room. Like, I feel like there's a story here. Like, that could be a really compelling. If you got a great screenwriter, directing team, and a fantastic person to play the lead, probably, I mean, Crumb would be in it, and Krantz and Bakshi, but definitely Bakshi. Like, that would be the lead character of the movie.
Yeah,
like someone needs to make this.
Like, I see them finding this comic book in the store. I'm like, oh, what's this? Like, I mean, I see the whole thing. Like, do it.
Like, can't you see the scene of like the montage of them trying to sell it to studios?
Yeah.
And the scene of them screening it for Warner Brothers. I mean, that
and
would
the
be
payoff
compelling.
that made $90 million. Like, it's insane.
I feel like for most people, don't know that this movie exists. I don't know that. I feel like most people are not aware that there's this X-rated animated movie from 72. And I feel like that could bring awareness, at least of the property, to make a film about its origins, its making,
Yeah, it's like, now that we're talking about it, I feel like maybe I vaguely like heard this title at some point, because I like the font. I don't know if it just looks like something else that I am thinking of, but I am like, that looks very familiar, but I don't know. I don't know.
But I love, some movies I've talked about on the podcast, I go on Wikipedia and I look around and there's like nothing. There's nothing about its making. And I'm like, oh, okay. But like this one, I touched on maybe like a fourth, maybe a third of what was on I could find online. There was a lot of stuff that I just cut for time for this. But like, I love movies that have all sorts of fascinating tell-alls about its history. And this is one of the most interesting I've talked about, I think, from the beginning. So it was fun. I'm glad I did it. But I'm happy to move on.
Yes.
I was like, ooh, Fritz the Cat, April 72. I should probably do that one. I'm not like, I've never really looked forward to it. I was just like, it was like slowly coming. It was the same thing as The Godfather, in that it was very intimate, like how The Godfather was intimidating for me to do an episode about that great classic movie. And it's kind of in the same span of time. I'm like,
shocking.
You've never seen it?
I'm someone that's seen Fritz the Cat, but not The Godfather. So that's shocking.
That's where you are in your film watching. You have seen
for some
Fritz,
reason, The
but
Godfather's always been a
Corleone.
blind spot.
So I had who did I talk to about it? Because I just recorded an episode. It will have dropped by now, with Kenneth Turan, who was the film critic for the LA Times. It was a really great conversation we had about the movie. And a few people have reached out about like, oh, are you doing a Godfather episode for your podcast? I'm like, yes. I think I should probably do one. If I'm gonna do Fritz the Cat, I should probably do The Godfather. But I had someone who said they'd never seen it. I said, Godfather is not a movie you can like watch while you're doing laundry or like, you need to find a night. This is what I said, find a weekend where you're not doing much. Friday night, like, pay attention. And watch.
I'm a film viewer.
Watch the movie
like,
its entirety. Don't split it up into pieces. Like, watch it. And then Saturday night, watch part 2. And then if you want to, 3 is not as good as I'm sure you've heard as 1 and 2.
I know all the stories,
I like it better than others. I think 3 has a lot of interesting things in it. It's just not at the level of the first 2. Sunday night, you can watch the third one.
Poor Sofia Coppola. Let me tell you that.
She's
poor woman.
Yeah. Well,
I've watched clips.
I think she's done. I think she's okay. I think Sofia Coppola is doing okay.
Yeah, she's doing great. I watched clips though from that movie, and I'm like, I get what people were saying, but I'm also like, oh, guys, calm down. It's not that bad.
She's
like,
fine. Like, she's clearly fine. There's something a little bit off with her performance. Sure. You can tell she's kind of new to the acting scene there, but it does not bother me the way it does other people. Winona Ryder would have been great. Yeah, she's fantastic.
And I heard he tried to get Madonna for like a second.
Oh, he did? Oh, that would have been interesting.
That's what I heard. I know lots of trivia about The Godfather, but I've never seen it.
Yeah, I mean, part 2, many people consider part 2 better than the first one. I'm not one of those people. It's very close. Part 2 goes back and forth in time in a way that always throws me a little bit versus Godfather, which is more streamlined of a story. So I just prefer the Godfather 1. But at the very least, find a night where you're not doing anything. There's not a movie to watch. Put on the Godfather. It is. I watched it again for the podcast. I hadn't seen it in a few years, and it's just, it is the fastest 3 hours. It is just so compelling all the way through. It's like one great scene after another for 3 hours. Like, it doesn't ever have a lull. Amazing ensemble cast. Much better film than Fritz the Cat. You love Diane Keaton?
I love Diane Keaton. I hear she's not
Diane Keaton is, she's really, we think of her for her comedy, but she's great in all 3, I think, of the Godfather movies and in other dramas too.
Her a good part.
We just talked about that this morning, talking about Play It Again Sam. Diane Keaton's in Play It Again Sam. And I was talking about how it's been hard. She's one of my all-time favorites. Same. And since Something's Gotta Give in 2003, which is, we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of that movie, she has not had a great role in 20 years. Like, she's good in Morning Glory. She's good in that. I enjoyed Book Club as like just an entertaining romp that I got to watch with my mom. But like, in terms of like a quality role for her, it's been 20 years.
The last time I watched her in something where I went, I'm enjoying what she's doing in this, was probably The Family Stone.
Family Stone was right after. That was 2005. So that, I would consider that, that's a strong film.
Like, someone write her. I guess she did the Young Pope show.
Oh, right. She did do that. That was a nice, like, dramatic turn. It was kind of brief. She's not in the whole thing. She was in it here and there. It's like, at least it was nice to see her do drama again. Yeah,
at some point, like, don't give Meryl Streep something and instead give it to Diane Keaton. I would love to see that.
Well, that's why I love the movie Marvin's Room, because it's both of them. It's both Meryl Streep and Diane Keaton, and they're great together in that movie.
Yeah.
How funny that I would talk about this in 2 different episodes. Play It Again Sam and Fritz the Cat. There it is.
I'm Diane Keaton.
All right. So that takes us to our final 2 segments, unless you have a lot more to say about Fritz the Cat.
No, I'm good. I've got it.
So Divine Double Feature, that's where we pick a more modern film to pair. So like Fritz the Cat, it's a brief 78 minutes. Someone watches this. What do you recommend they put on right after? That shows kind of like, in some ways at least, like the evolution of the art form of animation. Like, what would you have them put on now?
The one that came to mind was Sausage Party. That was mine. Yeah, it seems like the natural spiritual.
I was like, what in the last 5 years, 10 years was rated R animation? And I remembered Sausage Party. I didn't have to look it up. I watched that in a theater, and I remember I laughed. Like, I think I saw it with my younger brother, and it was just one of those, like, how often do you get an R-rated animated film? This is very rare. And it had been a while since South Park, and it had a great cast of voice actors, and like,
it made me giggle.
It was really creative. And the part that I can never forget is like that when they leave the supermarket and they're so excited, and then that montage of like horror to the nth degree of them all getting killed and fried in the microwave and being chopped by, like, that moment has never escaped me. I still to this day, when I put something in the microwave or I'm like cutting like a carrot or something, I think of Sausage Party.
There's just lots of dumb but also like clever jokes, like when they're eating, the woman's eating like a baby carrot and the guy's like, she's eating children. Like it's so stupid, but it makes me giggle.
So that's maybe the 4th or 5th time I've been doing this for a year and a half, so we both picked the same movie. Nice, Sausage Party. Nice. Awesome. Yeah, and that's just that's a much better film, I think, than Fritz the Cat. I would just like watch a couple clips of Fritz and then put on Sausage Party and call it a night. That's my recommendation. All right, so that's like the perfect segue to Beyond the Flick. I mean, speaking of adult animation, of course Sausage Party would be a part of that. But anything else you've seen PG-13 or up that's a little bit more adult that you would recommend, like that you think are pretty strong in the field of adult animated feature film?
The ones that came, I wrote down a couple. Cool World, I mentioned. That one was more like for just to notate, but that's not really like great of a movie. In terms of ones I actually enjoyed, Isle of Dogs was PG-13, but I thought that was gorgeous.
I wrote that down. I wrote that title down. It's a great movie. Isle of Dogs.
Waking Life is another one that came to mind. Anomalisa.
And Waking Life is interesting in that it was shot live action, right? And then they animated over it.
It's
kind of like my pick for my number one pick. Which I'll say in a moment. I just watched it.
I feel like I know what's
I think you know it too.
I feel like I know.
I think you know too. Any others that come to mind?
Those were the main ones that came to mind.
So I mean, it's a little bit different kind of style of animation, but I thought of Team America World Police would also be a good like double feature.
I didn't know that counted as animation because it's puppets.
It's puppets,
But I love that movie.
It's close enough, you know. And then speaking of Waking Life, A Scanner Darkly is also interesting animated film by Linklater, Keanu Reeves, Winona Ryder. The Simpsons movie, was that PG-13 or PG? I forgot to look it up, but I felt like that was a little bit more.
It feels PG-13. It feels like it was PG-13.
So a title I need to see. I looked at like 3 lists, and one that kept coming up from 1981. It's called Heavy Metal. Have you heard of that movie?
Oh, I've never seen it.
It's an R-rated animated film from 81 that I've heard. Like it's one of the better like R-rated animated movies, and it's like one of the few ones from the 80s, and it's got a good voice cast, and I've somehow just missed that one. I haven't seen it. So if I'm still doing this in 9 years,
I've heard of it so many times, but I've never watched that. Or also the one that kept saying, I'm like, I really need to finally see this movie, because when I was researching was Waltz with Bashir.
I wrote that down too.
I've never seen it, but
I haven't seen that either. Amazing. Akira, that's another one I wrote down. I haven't seen. That's like it's R or PG-13 animated film.
I don't know it.
But so my 3. So if I had to pick my 3, I'd go with South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. I mean, it's great. It's so much fun. I remember. I think I've only seen it that one time. I rented it. Okay. I rented it in 2000. I remember. I laughed so hard. So I'd have to watch it. I'd have to watch it again.
Yeah, I watched it pretty recently, and it's very funny.
Yeah, and then this was animation, right? Or now I'm thinking about it, was it Puppets? Anomalisa by Spike Jonze? Was that Puppets?
I guess it was like, that's the thing, like,
or was it animation?
I know. I was thinking about that too. I was
thinking it was animation, but now I'm thinking maybe it was puppets.
I know. I loved it though. I loved it.
Beautiful film.
Beautiful. It was so interesting. But now I'm like, wait, was it puppets or was
I should have looked it up briefly here. I thought it was animation, but now that you mentioned Team America World Police, I'm like, wait, maybe it was puppets. Either way, it's not your typical kind of drama. It's not. It's Jennifer Jason Leigh and a great voice cast, and Spike, not Spike Jonze, the writer. It's Charlie Kaufman.
Charlie Kaufman. Yeah.
Spike Jonze. Did Spike Jonze have anything to do with Anomalisa?
I thought he did.
Or was it Charlie? Didn't Charlie Kaufman direct it? Let me look real quick.
Let's say
I'm sounding really smart about this movie.
Oh, please.
And
he co-directed it. Oh, okay, all right.
Anomalisa. Right. Who co-directed it?
It was Charlie Kaufman and Duke Johnson.
Oh, okay. So 2015, right? Because that was the year I remember. I was I really loved Jennifer Jason Leigh's work in The Hateful Eight, and that was also 2015. She got an Oscar nomination, and then nominated for one. So it is puppets. It looks like puppets. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
And it was nominated for best animated feature. So I guess
it should have. It was amazing.
Puppets, I guess count as animation, and at least in that context. I don't know what else you would give a movie like that for the Oscar.
I just love it's like an art house character study film, but it's puppets. It's so interesting.
It's like what you would see, like an indie drama you would see that just happens to be puppets. And so Charlie Kaufman, I apologize, I said Spike Jonze. Those two just run so close for me when I think of Being John Malkovich adaptation. Like they just sometimes I forget which ones.
I wish Spike Jonze had directed I'm Thinking of Ending Things.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I loved the script, but Charlie Kaufman, I think, is such an interesting visionary, but I don't think he's always great with directing.
Yeah, I haven't responded that Synecdoche, New York film with Philip Seymour Hoffman. I struggled with. I feel like I respond more to Charlie Kaufman as a screenwriter when someone else makes the movie, like Eternal Sunshine and Being John Malkovich and adaptation. There's something.
John Malkovich, one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, so I guess if I had to, of the films that he directed or co-directed, I guess my favorite would be Anomalisa, which he wrote and co-directed with Duke Johnson. I just remember being really moved by that film. I saw it in a theater when it came out. It was really great. But my favorite would be the one I just watched for the animated feature, documentary feature, and international feature, Flea, which I just watched a few nights ago.
I've still not seen it.
Maybe not necessarily the best like adult animated movie, but it's just it's still playing in my mind. It's interview footage that is animated over, and it's such a unique film. I was like, this, I've never seen a movie like this. It is a documentary, an international film, but it's animated over in this just lush style. Like it just looks beautiful, and it tells a really gripping story. And so I would just recommend, if you haven't seen Flea, it's on Hulu right now as of this recording.
Oh, it is. Oh, I didn't know Hulu. That. Oh, okay.
Watch it.
Oh, I definitely watch it.
It's really a beautiful film, and it has a few moments of just like really just shocking moments of violence, and it tells just a really great human story. And I really loved it. I hope, by the time this drops, the Oscars will have aired, so I don't know, but I hope it wins in one of those three categories. I don't think it's going to, because I feel like the only chance it has is documentary feature, and I just don't think they'll give that to an animated movie. That's my
I'd love for them to, but I don't think it's gonna happen.
Yeah. But at least it's, how cool is, I think that's a record. I don't think a movie has hit all three of those categories ever in the history of the Oscar.
No.
So all it needed to do was get into Best Picture, and then it could have gotten all four.
That would have been pretty impressive.
That would have been really impressive.
Yeah.
So yeah, I recommend check out Flea. Don't think of it as animation or just watch it. Yeah. It sucks you in, and it's fascinating. It has LGBTQ content, a gay character, gay. The speaker of the film, the main person that we hear from, who we hear his life story, is gay, and the story he tells is just fascinating. So check out Flea. That is on Hulu. And that's it. That's the end. We made it through Fritz the Cat.
We did it.
So it's been so much fun having you on here today. Could you talk about where our listeners can find you online, and if you have anything to promote, now would be the time, Zacary.
Well, if you want to follow me, you can find me at Zacary with no H. That's Zacary with no H on Instagram and Twitter. But I also host 2 podcasts.
Yeah, tell us about those.
So one is an LGBTQ advice podcast called Messy Mondays that I co-hosts with Tom Cornell. Comes out every Monday. It's in the title. And then I also host a film review and also just pop culture discussion podcast called Two Gays Watch, where it's me and another homosexual. Aaron Hallman, and that comes out. Right now we're doing recaps of RuPaul's Drag Race season 14 and UK versus the World. So right now we have episodes on Wednesdays and Fridays. But I think after Drag Race, we're thinking of just getting back to film reviews and other types of content, because Drag Race has been exhausting to do. But it's just a lot to cover. But you can find that at 2 Gays Watch on Instagram and Twitter as well. So,
awesome.
That's where you can find me.
Well, thanks again for being my guest for Fritz the Cat today, Zacary. We made it through. Thanks to all of you for listening. You can find us online at filmat50.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also check out my YouTube channel, Brian Rowe Video, where I'm not going to be talking about Fritz the Cat, but I do talk about Oscars history as well as the current contenders and things like that. Check that out at Brian Rowe Video. Until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.